He believed the hardest part of grief was letting go. He was wrong. Park Joon-Ho had done what powerful men often do. When life breaks them, he built walls out of success and assumed money could protect what he could no longer touch. For 18 years, he never missed a transfer, never questioned a receipt, never imagined the unthinkable. After all, how could a child with a $2 million trust fund be suffering? The file landed on his desk just before sunrise. No headlines, no accusations, just photos. A young woman folding donated clothes, standing in line for dinner, sleeping beneath fluorescent lights in a shelter she volunteered at to earn her meals. She had his daughter's eyes. That was the moment certainty collapsed. Because if Hannah Park was living like this, then someone had stolen more than money. They had stolen a childhood, a future, a family. One phone call followed, then another, then a single question asked not in anger, but with surgical calm. Where is the trust fund I created for my granddaughter? No one answered, and in that silence, a billionaire realized the truth too late. The greatest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you trusted to love your blood as their own. Park Joon-Ho stared at the photograph pinned beneath his desk lamp. The girl, his granddaughter, wore a grey hoodie 2 sizes too large. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face carried no makeup, no jewelry, no trace of the life he'd paid for. But her eyes held something he recognized instantly, the quiet resilience of someone who'd learned early that no one was coming to save her. He'd seen those eyes before, in his daughter's face, 20 years ago, when she told him she was pregnant and terrified. He'd failed her then, too. The investigation had started as routine estate planning. His attorneys recommended an audit before restructuring his holdings standard procedure for a man worth $4.3 billion. But when Daniel Cross, the private investigator, opened the records on Hannah Park's trust fund, the numbers didn't just fail to add up. They told a story of systematic erasure. $2 million, deposited in carefully structured installments over 18 years, every quarter, like clockwork. Education expenses, living costs, medical care, all approved by the designated guardian, Min Seo Park, his late wife's younger sister, a woman he'd trusted because family was supposed to mean something. The money went in, but it never came out. Not for tuition, not for housing, not for anything that resembled the life he'd envisioned for the only piece of his daughter he had left. Instead, Hannah Park spent her 18th birthday volunteering at Hope House Women's Shelter in downtown Los Angeles, not out of charity, but necessity. She worked for meal credits. She slept on a cot when beds weren't available. She existed in the margins of a city filled with people who had nothing, because somehow she'd become one of them. The question burned through Joon-Ho's mind as dawn broke over Palo Alto. How does a child disappear when you're paying for her to be seen? He reached for his phone, his hand steadier than it had been in years, not because he wasn't afraid of what he'd find, but because after 18 years of distance, he finally understood what he should have known from the beginning. Love without presence is just money, and money, he was about to discover, could be stolen far more easily than trust could be rebuilt. Park Joon-Ho learned English from technical manuals and ambition. When he arrived in San Francisco in 1987, he carried 2 suitcases, a degree in electrical engineering from Seoul National University, and the bone-deep certainty that survival required silence. He didn't tell his new colleagues about the family he'd left behind. He didn't explain that his father's debts had forced him across an ocean. He simply worked. Silicon Valley in the late 80s was a fever dream of innovation and ruthless competition. Joon-Ho found work at a semiconductor startup in Mountain View, sharing a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 other engineers. They ate instant noodles and argued about circuit designs until dawn. Money was tight, but the future felt wide open. He was good at what he did, brilliant, even. By 1991, he'd filed his first patent. By 1993, he'd co-founded his own company, developing networking infrastructure that would become essential to the early internet boom. By 1998, when his company went public, Park Joon-Ho was worth $340 million. Success, he discovered, was the best anesthetic for loneliness. He met Haewon at a fundraiser in Palo Alto. She was a violinist with the San Francisco Symphony, Korean-American, first generation like him, but raised with the kind of cultural fluency he'd never quite mastered. She laughed easily. She didn't ask about his work. She made him feel like a person instead of a portfolio. They married within a year. Their daughter, Grace, was born 18 months later. For a brief window, Joon-Ho believed he'd built something that mattered more than market share. He'd come home to find Grace playing in the backyard of their Los Altos Hills estate, Haewon teaching her simple melodies on a child-sized violin. He'd watch from the doorway, his heart almost painfully full, thinking, this is what I crossed the ocean for. But then Haewon got sick. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, diagnosed too late. She lasted 14 months. Grace was 9 when her mother died. Joon-Ho was 43, and he had no idea how to comfort a child while his own world was collapsing. So he did what he knew best. He worked. He expanded the company. He traveled to Tokyo, Seoul, London, New York. He made sure Grace had everything money could provide: the best schools, music lessons, therapy if she needed it. But he was never home. By the time Grace turned 18, they were strangers, sharing a last name. She left for college, NYU, and barely called. Joon-Ho told himself it was normal, that daughters grew up and away. He ignored the fact that when she did visit, she looked at him with polite distance, as if he were a distant relative rather than her father. Then, at 22, she came home for Christmas and told him she was pregnant. "I'm keeping the baby," Grace said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "I don't need your permission. I just thought you should know." Joon-Ho sat across from her in his study, the fireplace crackling between them. He wanted to ask who the father was. He wanted to ask if she was scared. He wanted to say something that sounded like love. Instead, he asked, "What do you need?" Grace looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Nothing," she said quietly. "I never did." She left the next morning, moved to Los Angeles, found work as a session musician. Joon-Ho sent money, which she accepted without comment. He told himself they'd repair things after the baby came, that a grandchild would be a bridge back to the daughter he'd lost. But Grace died in childbirth. Complications, emergency surgery that came too late. The baby, a girl, survived. Hannah Grace Park, 5 pounds, 7 ounces, born the 14th of August, 2006, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Joon-Ho held her exactly once, in the hospital, while nurses explained what came next. She was impossibly small, impossibly fragile. He looked down at her sleeping face and felt a terror so complete it bordered on paralysis. He had failed his wife. He had failed his daughter. If he tried to raise this child, he would fail her too. So he made a choice that would haunt him for 18 years. He let his sister-in-law, Min-seo Park, take her. Min-seo had helped with Grace after Haewon died. She was involved in the Korean church community in Los Angeles, married with 2 sons of her own. She promised Hannah would be raised with family, with culture, with love. Joon-Ho believed her, because he needed to believe someone could do what he couldn't. He set up the trust fund within a month, $2 million, carefully structured to provide for every need: education, healthcare, housing, enrichment, monthly stipends that would increase as Hannah grew older. He hired attorneys to draft the documents. He named Min-seo as trustee and guardian. Then he went back to Palo Alto and buried himself in work. His company acquired 2 competitors. He launched a venture capital fund. He donated millions to Stanford, to medical research, to scholarship programs. He built a legacy that would outlive him, all while convincing himself that the checks he signed every quarter were proof of love. He never visited, never called. He told himself Hannah was better off without a grandfather who didn't know how to be present, who carried grief like a second skeleton beneath his skin. But he never missed a payment. Not once. Not ever. That had to mean something, didn't it? The law offices of Morrison and Tate occupied the 42nd floor of the Bank of America building in downtown San Francisco. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the bay, the bridge, the city sprawling toward the Pacific. James Morrison had handled Joon-Ho's legal affairs for 20 years, and he knew better than to waste his client's time with pleasantries. "The trust is ironclad," Morrison said, sliding a leather portfolio across the mahogany table. "Or it should be." It was March 2024. Hannah would turn 18 in 5 months. The meeting was supposed to be procedural, a review of the trust structure before full control transferred to her. Instead, Morrison's expression carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering bad news to someone powerful. Joon-Ho opened the portfolio. Inside were copies of every document he'd signed 18 years ago. The trust agreement, the appointment of Min Seo as trustee, the distribution schedule, everything legal, everything proper, should be, Joon-Ho repeated. Morrison pulled out a second folder, this one thinner. "We requested financial statements from the trustee as part of the standard pre-transfer audit. What we received was incomplete." Joon-Ho scanned the pages. Bank statements, transaction records. But the pattern made no sense. Large withdrawals every month far exceeding the approved stipends with vague descriptions. Educational expenses, medical costs, residential fees. "Where's the backup documentation?" Joon-Ho asked. "That's the problem," Morrison said carefully. "There isn't any. No tuition invoices, no medical bills, no lease agreements. Just withdrawals." Joon-Ho felt something cold settle in his chest. "How much?" Morrison didn't flinch. "As of last month, the trust balance is $127,000. From an initial deposit of $2 million, plus investment growth that should have brought it to approximately $3.2 million. The room went silent except for the muted sound of traffic 42 floors below. $3 million, Joon-Ho said quietly. "Gone. Withdrawn over 18 years, Morrison clarified. "Legally, by the appointed trustee, but without documentation. We can't verify the funds were used for Hannah's benefit, as required by the trust terms." Joon-Ho stared at the numbers. He'd built his fortune on pattern recognition, on seeing what others missed, and this pattern was unmistakable. Systematic theft, hidden behind the legitimacy of family obligation. "I want an investigation," he said. "Private, thorough. I want to know where every dollar went." Morrison nodded. "I'll make the call. But Joon-Ho, if this goes where I think it's going, it won't be quiet. Family disputes rarely are. I don't care about quiet." Joon-Ho closed the portfolio with deliberate precision. "I care about my granddaughter. Where is she now?" "According to the trustee, Hannah is enrolled in a private preparatory program in Los Angeles. We have an address on file. Send someone to verify it." Morrison hesitated. "You haven't seen her since she was an infant." "I know. This could be complicated." Emotionally, Joon-Ho met his attorney's eyes. $3 million missing. My granddaughter's entire childhood unaccounted for. It's already complicated. Within 48 hours, Daniel Cross was on the case. Cross was ex-FBI, a specialist in financial crimes and asset tracing. He'd helped Joon-Ho navigate a corporate espionage case 5 years earlier, and he had a reputation for finding what people tried to hide. "Start with the money," Joon-Ho instructed during their first meeting. "Then find my granddaughter." Cross nodded, making notes on his tablet. "The trustee, Min Seo Park. Any reason to suspect her specifically?" "She's family," Joon-Ho said. "I trusted her." Cross looked up. "In my experience, that's usually reason enough." The investigation moved quickly. Bank records showed a clear pattern. Monthly transfers from the trust account to Min Seo's personal account, then cash withdrawals that left no electronic trail. Cross found property records showing Min Seo and her family had moved from a modest home in Koreatown to a $1.8 million house in Hancock Park 7 years earlier. Her sons attended private schools costing $40,000 per year. Her husband drove a Mercedes S-Class, all on a youth pastor's salary. But it was the address for Hannah that stopped the investigation cold. "The preparatory program doesn't exist," Cross reported during their second meeting. "The address on file is a commercial property in Mid-City, currently vacant." Joon-Ho's jaw tightened. "Then where is she?" Cross hesitated. "That took longer to find. Your granddaughter isn't hiding. She's just not where anyone thought to look. He slid a photograph across the desk. Joon-Ho picked it up. A teenage girl with dark hair pulled back, wearing a gray hoodie, standing outside a building with a sign reading, Hope House Women's Shelter. She volunteers there, Cross said, 3 days a week, in exchange for meal credits. The words didn't make sense. Joon-Ho read them again, as if rearranging the letters might change the meaning. She's homeless? Not exactly. She has a caseworker. Some nights she stays at the shelter, some nights with a network of families from a community center. She's technically in the foster system, but she aged through most of it without anyone noticing. She's careful, keeps her head down. From what I can tell, she's been surviving like this for at least 2 years. Joon-Ho couldn't speak. The photograph blurred as rage and guilt crashed through him in waves. There's more, Cross said quietly. She doesn't know about the trust fund. She doesn't know you've been sending money. According to the people I spoke with, Hannah believes her grandfather wanted nothing to do with her, that she was a burden no one wanted to carry. The room tilted. Joon-Ho gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. Min-seo told her that. Min-seo told everyone that. The church community, the foster system, even Hannah's school counselors before she dropped out. The story was always the same. Wealthy grandfather, dead mother, unwanted child. No one questioned it, because no one thought to verify it. Joon-Ho looked at the photograph again. His granddaughter, 18 years old, living in a shelter while millions of dollars sat untouched, money meant for her, stolen by the woman he'd trusted to protect her. Where is Min-seo now? His voice was barely above a whisper. Still in Hancock Park, still active in her church, still respected in the community. Joon-Ho stood, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Set up a meeting with Hannah. I don't care how you do it. I need to see her. Cross nodded. And Min-seo? Joon-Ho's expression was colder than Cross had ever seen it. Once I know Hannah is safe, we're going to ask her a very simple question, which is, where is every single dollar I sent for my granddaughter's life? The financial records arrived in 3 boxes. Daniel Cross spread them across the conference table in Joon-Ho's Palo Alto office, organizing 18 years of betrayal into neat columns of evidence. It's methodical, Cross said, pointing to highlighted sections. Almost professional. The early years were smaller amounts, $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Easy to justify as legitimate expenses for a child. But watch what happens around 2015. He slid forward a spreadsheet showing a sharp increase in withdrawals. By the time Hannah was 9, Min-seo was pulling $15,000 monthly from the trust. That's when they bought the Hancock Park house, Cross continued. Cash down payment of $400,000. The mortgage payments align almost perfectly with the trust withdrawals. Joon-Ho studied the numbers, his mind cataloging each theft with cold precision. She bought a house with my granddaughter's money. House, cars, private school tuition for her sons, vacation property in Palm Springs. I pulled credit card statements, luxury purchases, country club memberships, donations to the church in her name. She built an entire lifestyle on that trust fund. And Hannah. Cross flipped to another section, this one noticeably thinner. I tracked down her school records. She attended public schools in Koreatown until 8th grade, then nothing. No high school enrollment, no diploma, no GED. She disappeared from the system at 14. Joon-Ho's hands clenched. Where was she? Best I can piece together. Bouncing between temporary housing. I found a case file from Child Protective Services, an anonymous report about a teenager sleeping in her aunt's garage. CPS investigated, but Min-seo claimed Hannah was troubled and refused help. She implied the girl had behavioral problems, that she'd tried everything but Hannah kept running away. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But it worked. CPS closed the case, and Hannah ended up in the informal foster network community families who take in kids short-term. No official paperwork. She learned to survive by being invisible. Cross pulled out another photograph, this one from a high school yearbook. Hannah, at 13, her face already showing the careful blankness of someone learning not to want things. The shelter director, Evelyn Brooks, has known her for 3 years. Says Hannah is one of the most responsible volunteers they have. Never complains. Never asks for anything beyond meal credits. Evelyn tried to get her into job training programs, but Hannah kept saying she was fine. She's not fine, Joon-Ho said, his voice rough. She's surviving. There's a difference. Cross nodded. Evelyn agrees with you. She's been trying to connect Hannah with resources, but the girl's terrified of the system. She thinks if she draws attention, she'll lose what little stability she has. Joon-Ho walked to the window, looking out over the Stanford campus in the distance. His company's headquarters was 2 miles from here. He'd walked these streets for decades, building empires, while his granddaughter learned to make herself small enough to disappear. The legal case, he asked. Rock solid. Breach of fiduciary duty. Embezzlement. Fraud. The trust documents are explicit. Every withdrawal requires documented expenses for Hannah's direct benefit. Min Seo can't produce a single receipt that proves the money went where it was supposed to go. Will she fight it? People like her always fight, Cross said. She spent 18 years building credibility in her community. Admitting the truth means losing everything. Reputation, status, the life she stole. Joon-Ho turned back to the table, his decision made. I want to meet Hannah first, before any of this becomes public. She deserves to know the truth from me, not from lawyers or news reports. Evelyn Brooks can facilitate it. I told her you were Hannah's grandfather, that there were questions about the trust fund. She's protective of Hannah, but she wants what's best for her. When? Tomorrow if you want. The shelter serves dinner at 6. Hannah will be there. Joon-Ho nodded slowly. Tomorrow. After 18 years of distance, he'd see his granddaughter for the second time in her life. The first time, she'd been hours old, impossibly fragile, and he'd been too broken to hold her. Now, she was 18, hardened by survival, living in a shelter because he'd failed to verify the one thing that mattered, that the people he trusted actually loved her. I'll be there, he said. But Daniel, I need you to be ready. Ready for what? Once Hannah knows the truth, I'm going after Min Seo. Everything. Criminal charges, civil suit, public exposure. I want her to understand what it feels like to lose everything you thought was safe. Cross packed up his files. Just remember, your granddaughter is going to be watching how you handle this. Revenge might feel good, but what she needs is stability. She'll have both, Joon-Ho said. Min Seo took 18 years from her. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what that means. After Cross left, Joon-Ho sat alone in his office as twilight settled over Silicon Valley. The photograph of Hannah sat on his desk, the girl with his daughter's eyes, wearing a hoodie and carrying the weight of abandonment she should never have felt. He'd spent his entire adult life believing that success was measured in market value and quarterly returns. He'd convinced himself that providing financially was the same as providing love. But sitting here, surrounded by evidence of his failure, Joon-Ho understood something he should have learned decades ago. Wealth without presence is just money, and money, he was about to prove, could be reclaimed. Trust could not. Hope House Women's Shelter sat on a quiet street in downtown Los Angeles, wedged between a community health clinic and a small church. The building was old but well-maintained. Its brick facade painted a hopeful yellow that had faded under years of California sun. A hand-painted sign above the door read, Safe Harbor for Women in Transition. Joon-Ho arrived at 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before dinner service. His driver had offered to wait, but Joon-Ho dismissed him. This wasn't the kind of meeting that felt right with a town car idling at the curb. Evelyn Brooks met him at the door. She was in her 50s, black, with silver-streaked locks pulled back, and the kind of direct gaze that came from years of seeing through people's excuses. Mr. Park, she said, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you for coming in person. Thank you for arranging this. She led him inside. The shelter was cleaner than he'd expected. Brighter. Women of various ages moved through the common area, some setting tables for dinner, others reading, a few watching a small television mounted in the corner. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and something cooking that might have been chili. Hannah doesn't know you're here, Evelyn said quietly as they walked toward her office. I told her someone wanted to talk about volunteer opportunities. I thought it would be easier if the conversation happened naturally, rather than with a lot of warning. Is that what you recommend? Evelyn paused outside her office door. Mr. Park, I'm going to be direct with you. Hannah has spent her entire childhood learning that she's disposable, that the people who were supposed to care for her didn't want the burden. If you're here to ease your conscience and then disappear again, I'd rather you leave now. Joon-Ho met her eyes. I'm here to give her what should have been hers from the beginning. Money. Family. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Wait here. I'll get her. Joon-Ho stood in the hallway, his heart hammering in a way it hadn't since his first board meeting 30 years ago. Through the window of Evelyn's office, he could see framed photos on the walls, women graduating from programs, children playing, success stories. Then he heard footsteps. Soft, cautious. Hannah appeared at the end of the hallway. She was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'4", wearing jeans and a grey sweatshirt with Los Angeles Public Library printed across the front. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her face bare of makeup. She carried herself with a stillness that suggested someone used to making herself unnoticeable. But when she looked at him, Joon-Ho's breath caught. The shape of her face, the set of her eyes. She looked exactly like Grace had at 18, before grief and distance had carved away the softness. Hannah, Evelyn said gently, this is Mr. Park. He wanted to speak with you about something important. Hannah's expression didn't change, but her shoulders tensed slightly. Did I do something wrong? No, Joon-Ho said quickly, his voice rougher than intended. Nothing wrong. I needed to meet you. She looked confused, her dark eyes flicking between him and Evelyn, searching for context. Evelyn touched Hannah's shoulder. Why don't you two talk in my office? I'll check on dinner. Before Hannah could protest, Evelyn had guided her into the small office and closed the door, leaving them alone. Hannah stood near the desk, her posture defensive. I don't understand. Do you need volunteers for something? Joon-Ho realized she had no idea who he was. Why would she? They'd never met. He was just a name on documents she'd never seen. A stranger who'd spent 18 years convincing himself that distance was protection. My name is Park Joon-Ho, he said slowly. I'm your grandfather. The words hung in the air. Hannah stared at him, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like panic. No, she said quietly. My grandfather doesn't. He doesn't want anything to do with me. That's not true, Aunt Min-seo said. I know what she said. Joon-Ho took a careful step closer. Hannah, everything Min-seo told you was a lie. She shook her head, backing toward the door. I don't understand. Why are you here? Because I just found out where you've been living, how you've been surviving, and because I need you to know something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document, a copy of the trust fund agreement. I've been sending money for you since the day you were born. $2 million, placed in trust for your education, your housing, your future, all of it stolen by the person I trusted to take care of you. Hannah took the document with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, seeing her name, seeing the numbers that didn't make sense with the life she knew. This isn't real, she whispered. It is. Every word. And I'm going to make sure you get everything that should have been yours. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her expression shattered. Why didn't you come sooner? It was the question Joon-Ho deserved, the one he'd been asking himself since Daniel Cross handed him that first photograph. He had 1,000 reasons: grief, fear, the belief that money could substitute for presence. But standing here, watching his granddaughter try to process 18 years of abandonment, all those reasons felt like the excuses they were. I was wrong, he said simply. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. I thought the money was enough. I was wrong about everything. Hannah sank into a chair, still holding the document, her hands shaking. Aunt Min-seo took it. All of it? Yes. But she told everyone I was trouble, that you didn't want me, that I should be grateful, her voice broke. Joon-Ho moved closer, then stopped, unsure if his presence would comfort or frighten her. You were never a burden, he said, his voice thick with emotion he'd buried for 2 decades. You were wanted. You are wanted. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left proving that to you." Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. Her eyes, Grace's eyes, searched his face for lies, for the inevitable betrayal that life had taught her always came. But Joon-Ho didn't look away. He let her see everything. The guilt, the grief, the desperate hope that 18 years of failure could somehow be redeemed. "I don't know you," Hannah said finally, her voice small. "I know, but I'd like to change that, if you'll let me." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, then stood, holding the document carefully, as if it might disappear. "What happens now?" "Now," Joon-Ho said, "we get you out of this shelter. We get you into a real home. And then we make sure Min Seo answers for every lie she told." Hannah nodded slowly, still processing. "I have dinner shift in 10 minutes. Can someone else cover it?" I guess." "Then let's go. We have a lot to talk about." As they left the office, Evelyn was waiting in the hallway, her expression cautiously hopeful. Hannah looked at her, then back at Joon-Ho, then at the document still clutched in her hands. "Is this real?" she asked again, quieter this time. Joon-Ho met his granddaughter's eyes and gave her the only answer that mattered. "Yes, and I promise you I'm not going anywhere this time." The hotel suite overlooking Century City felt like a museum. Joon-Ho had booked it that same evening, insisting Hannah needed space away from the shelter while they sorted everything out. She'd stood in the doorway for a full minute, staring at the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, before finally stepping inside. "You can stay here as long as you need," Joon-Ho said, setting down the bag Evelyn had packed for her. Everything Hannah owned fit into a single backpack. "Tomorrow, we'll find something more permanent." Hannah walked to the window, looking out at the city lights spreading toward the ocean. She'd lived in Los Angeles her entire life but had never seen it from this height. Everything looked different from up here. Cleaner, more organized, like someone else's city. "I don't understand how this happened," she said quietly. "For 18 years, Joon-Ho sat on the edge of the sofa, suddenly exhausted. "I failed you. That's how it happened. But you didn't know. I should have known. I should have visited. I should have called. I convinced myself that money was the same as caring. And that was cowardice." He looked at her profile against the window. "Your mother. When she died, I broke. I couldn't function. I couldn't even look at you without seeing everything I'd lost. So I told myself you'd be better off with family who could actually be present. I thought Min Seo would love you the way I couldn't." Hannah turned to face him. She didn't. No, she didn't. The silence between them was heavy with everything they'd both lost. Finally, Hannah moved to sit in the chair across from him, her posture still careful, still ready to disappear if needed. "Tell me about my mom," she said. "Please." Joon-Ho's throat tightened. "Your mother was brilliant. Stubborn. She played violin like she could make the instrument speak. She got that from her mother, your grandmother, Haewon. They used to practice together every Sunday morning. The house would fill with music." Hannah listened, her eyes never leaving his face. "But I was never there for it. I was always working, always traveling. I told myself I was building a future for them, but really, I was just running from anything that felt too vulnerable." He paused. "When Haewon died, Grace was 9, and I failed her the same way I failed you by thinking money could replace presence. Is that why she didn't talk about you?" Hannah asked softly. "She told you about me. A little. Before she died, I was born at Cedars Sinai, and she was there for 3 days after. The nurses said she talked to me the whole time, even when she was too weak to hold me." Hannah's voice wavered. "Someone told me," she said, "my grandfather was important, that he built things that mattered, but that he didn't know how to be close to people." Joon-Ho closed his eyes against the wave of grief. She was right. Was she scared? At the end, "I don't know. I wasn't there." Hannah absorbed that, then nodded slowly. "Aunt Min Seo told me my mom didn't want me, that I was a mistake that killed her." The words hit Joon-Ho like a physical blow. "That's a lie. Your mother wanted you desperately. She was terrified but excited. She'd bought baby clothes, painted a nursery in her apartment. She talked about teaching you violin. about making sure you grew up with music. Then why did Aunt Min-seo say those things? Because it justified taking everything. If you were unwanted, if you were a burden, then no one would question why you weren't living the life that trust fund should have provided. Joon-Ho leaned forward. Hannah, I need you to understand every cruelty Min-seo told you was designed to keep you from asking questions. If you believed no one wanted you, you'd never think to wonder why you were living in poverty, while millions of dollars sat in your name. Hannah's hands clenched in her lap. I thought I deserved it. The way she treated me. I thought if I just tried harder, was quieter, needed less, maybe she'd... Her voice broke. No. Joon-Ho moved to kneel in front of her chair, looking up at his granddaughter's tear-streaked face. None of this was your fault. Not one moment. You survived something no child should ever have to survive. And the fact that you're here, that you're this strong, is a testament to who you are, not who raised you. Hannah looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since they'd met, something in her careful armor cracked. I'm so tired, she whispered. I've been tired for so long. I know, and I'm angry. I'm so angry. I don't know what to do with it. Then be angry. You've earned that. She wiped her face roughly. What happens to her? Aunt Min-seo? That's partially up to you, Joon-Ho said, standing. The legal case is clear. She committed fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. She could face criminal charges. But I need to know what you want. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. I want her to admit it. All of it. I want everyone who believed her lies to know the truth. That's going to be public. Difficult. I don't care. She made me believe I was nothing. I want the world to know what she really is. Joon-Ho nodded, feeling something like pride cut through his grief. His granddaughter had survived 18 years of systematic cruelty, and instead of breaking, she'd become someone who demanded accountability. Then that's what we'll do, he said. But first, you need to rest. Real rest. Not the kind where you're listening for threats or planning your next meal. Hannah looked around the suite again, still not quite believing it was real. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, Joon-Ho admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. They ordered room service. Hannah's first instinct was to ask for the cheapest item, but Joon-Ho gently insisted she order whatever she wanted. They ate mostly in silence, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with both of them. Later, as Hannah stood to go to the bedroom, she paused. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming to find me. Joon-Ho's throat tightened. I should have done it 18 years ago. But you're here now. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And for a man who'd spent 2 decades building walls out of grief and guilt, a beginning felt like more than he deserved. After Hannah closed the bedroom door, Joon-Ho stood at the window, looking out at the city where his granddaughter had learned to survive alone. Tomorrow, they'd start the legal process. Tomorrow, Min-seo would face questions she couldn't answer. But tonight, for the first time in 18 years, Hannah Park was sleeping in safety. And that, Joon-Ho realized, was what mattered most. Everything else was just justice catching up. Min-seo Park's attorney was expensive, well-dressed, and deeply uncomfortable. His name was Robert Choi, and he'd built his practice representing Korean-American professionals in business disputes and estate planning. This was not what he'd signed up for. My client denies all allegations, Choi said, his tone careful. They were seated in a conference room at Morrison and Tate. Neutral ground. Min-seo sat beside him, her posture rigid, wearing a tasteful navy dress and pearls. She looked like what she was, a respected member of her church community, a woman who organized charity drives and hosted Bible studies. She did not look like a woman who'd stolen $3 million from her dead niece's child. Across the table sat Joon-Ho, James Morrison, and Daniel Cross. Hannah had asked to be present, and she sat at the end of the table, silent but steady. She'd refused to hide. Let's go through this systematically, Morrison said, opening a file. Mrs. Park, you were appointed trustee and guardian of Hannah Park in August 2006, correct? Yes, Min-seo said, her voice soft. She hadn't looked at Hannah once since entering the room. And you received monthly distributions from the trust fund established by Mr. Park for Hannah's benefit. I used that money to raise her. It's expensive to care for a child. Morrison slid a spreadsheet across the table. This shows $2.8 million in withdrawals over 18 years. The average annual expense of raising a child in Los Angeles, according to USDA data, is approximately $17,000. Even accounting for inflation and additional costs, we're looking at a maximum of $400,000 over 18 years. Where did the remaining $2.4 million go? Choi leaned forward. My client is not required to provide a detailed accounting. Actually, she is, Morrison interrupted. The trust documents are explicit. Every withdrawal must be for Hannah's direct benefit, with documentation. We've requested that documentation 3 times. You've provided nothing. Minseo's hands clenched in her lap. I gave her a home. I fed her. I tried to give her everything she needed. Then why? Joon-Ho said quietly, speaking for the first time. Is my granddaughter homeless? The room went silent. Minseo's face flushed. She ran away. Multiple times. She was troubled, difficult to manage. I tried everything, but she refused help. That's interesting, Cross said, pulling out his tablet. Because I spoke with her middle school counselors, and they described Hannah as quiet, respectful, and academically capable. I spoke with the director of Hope House Shelter, who says Hannah is one of their most reliable volunteers. I spoke with families in the informal foster network, and every single one said the same thing. Hannah was never trouble. She just needed stability. She's lying to them, Minseo said, her voice rising slightly. She always knew how to manipulate people. Enough! Hannah's voice cut through the room. She stood, her hands flat on the table, staring at her aunt. I want you to look at me. Minseo's eyes flicked toward her, then away. Look at me, Hannah repeated, harder. Slowly, Minseo met her gaze. I slept in your garage for 6 months when I was 14, Hannah said, her voice shaking but clear. You knew I was there. You left food out sometimes, but you never invited me inside. Never asked if I was okay. You just pretended I didn't exist. You wouldn't follow the house rules. I was 14. I did my homework in the public library because you said I was too disruptive at home. I ate meals at school because you said feeding me was too expensive. And then you told CPS I was troubled, that I refused help. So they closed the case and left me there. Minseo's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Park, I need to consult with you privately. But Joon-Ho stood, his presence commanding despite his age. When he spoke, his voice was colder than anyone in the room had ever heard it. Where is every dollar? Minseo stared at him, her composure cracking. Not an estimate, Joon-Ho continued. Not an explanation. The exact accounting. Where did $3 million go while my granddaughter learned to survive on meal credits? It went to her care. Your mortgage payment is $8,000 a month. Your property taxes are $24,000 annually. Your sons attend schools costing $40,000 each per year. Your husband drives a car worth $95,000. You donated $50,000 to your church last year in your own name. Joon-Ho's voice didn't rise, but the fury beneath it was unmistakable. Where is every dollar? Minseo's face crumbled. You don't understand what it was like. Raising someone else's child. The sacrifice. You weren't raising her, Hannah said. You were hiding her. I gave you more than you deserved. The words burst out of Minseo before she could stop them. Your mother was irresponsible, getting pregnant without being married. You were the evidence of her shame. I took you in, when no one else wanted. I wanted her, Joon-Ho said, his voice breaking. I wanted her from the moment she was born, and you made sure she never knew that. Minseo looked at him, then at Hannah, and something desperate entered her expression. I needed that money. Do you know how expensive it is to maintain respect in the community, to give my sons the opportunities they deserved? I did more for this family's reputation than anyone. By stealing from a child? Morrison's tone was incredulous. It wasn't stealing. It was redistribution. Grace was dead. Hannah didn't need that much money. My family did. The silence that followed was absolute. Choi closed his eyes. Mrs. Park, I cannot advise you to continue. I'm not going to let some ungrateful child ruin everything I've built, Min-seo said, standing abruptly. I raised her. I gave her shelter. If she was too difficult to manage, that's not my fault. Hannah stared at her aunt, and when she spoke, her voice was eerily calm. You didn't give me shelter. You gave me survival. There's a difference. I gave you more than you had any right to expect. You gave me nightmares, Hannah said. You gave me the belief that I was worthless. You gave me 18 years of wondering why I wasn't good enough to be wanted. She paused. But you also gave me something else. What? Proof that every lie you told can be documented. Every dollar you stole can be traced. And everyone who believed, you'll now know exactly what you are. Min-seo's face went white. Joon-Ho turned to Morrison. File everything. Criminal charges. Civil suit. I want every asset she purchased, with that money seized. And I want the church community to know how she funded her generosity. This will destroy my family. Min-seo whispered. You should have thought of that, Joon-Ho said quietly, before you destroyed mine. The meeting ended with Choi practically dragging Min-seo from the room. After they left, Hannah sank back into her chair, trembling. Joon-Ho sat beside her. You were incredible. I feel sick. That's normal. What she did was sick. Hannah looked at him. She really believed it. That I didn't deserve that money. That she did. Yes. How does someone become that? Joon-Ho didn't have an answer. He'd spent his life building companies, negotiating with world leaders, navigating billion-dollar deals, but the casual cruelty of family betrayal was something he couldn't rationalize. I don't know, he admitted, but we're going to make sure everyone else knows what happened. No more secrets. No more lies. Hannah nodded, exhausted but resolute. Justice was coming. It wouldn't erase 18 years of suffering, but it would ensure Min-seo could never do this to anyone else. And sometimes, that was enough. The Los Angeles County Superior Court wasn't designed for drama, but the morning of the 15th of May, 2025, felt like a reckoning. Media vans lined the street outside, reporters jostling for position. The case had broken in the press 2 months earlier. Billionaire's granddaughter found living in shelter, while aunts spent millions, and it had ignited every conversation about family, duty, and the price of silence. Inside courtroom 302, Joon-Ho sat behind the prosecution table, Morrison beside him. Hannah was in the second row, flanked by Evelyn Brooks and Daniel Cross. She'd wanted to testify, and the prosecutor had agreed. Min-seo entered wearing black, her hair pulled back severely. Her husband and sons weren't present. They distanced themselves publicly once the evidence became undeniable. Choi, her attorney, looked like a man who knew he was defending the indefensible. Judge Sarah Brennan took the bench, her expression neutral. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if there's sufficient cause to proceed with criminal charges. Let's begin. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Reyes, stood. Your Honor, the state will present evidence that Min-seo Park systematically embezzled approximately $2.8 million from a trust fund established for her niece, Hannah Park, while allowing the child to live in conditions tantamount to neglect. Reyes walked the court through the financial records. Every withdrawal, every purchase, every luxury funded by money meant for Hannah's education and care. She showed photos of the Hancock Park house, the cars, the private school tuition bills for Min-seo's sons. Then she showed photos of Hope House shelter, of Hannah at 14, thin and exhausted, of the garage where she'd slept. The courtroom was silent. The defense will argue this was poor record-keeping, Reyes said, but the pattern is clear. Min-seo Park used her position as trustee to fund a lifestyle she could never have afforded otherwise, while the child in her care learned to survive on meal credits. Choi stood for his cross-examination, but his heart wasn't in it. Your Honor, my client made mistakes in documentation, but she did provide housing and care. Counsel, Judge Brennan interrupted. I've reviewed the CPS reports. Miss Park was found sleeping in a shelter at age 16. How does that align with providing care? Choi had no answer. Then Hannah took the stand. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair down, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Reyes approached gently. "Hannah, can you describe your living situation when you were 14? Hannah's voice was steady. "I slept in my aunt's garage. She'd give me food sometimes, but mostly I ate at school. When CPS came, she told them I was troubled, that I refused help. I didn't refuse. I just didn't know help was supposed to exist." "Did your aunt ever tell you about the trust fund?" "No. She told me my grandfather wanted nothing to do with me, that I was a burden, that I should be grateful she'd taken me in at all." "And when did you learn the truth?" 6 months ago, when my grandfather found me." Reyes paused. "What did it feel like, learning you'd had millions of dollars meant for you while you were surviving in a shelter?" Hannah looked directly at Minseo. "It felt like my entire childhood was a lie. Like every time I went hungry, every time I felt worthless, someone was spending money that was supposed to prove I mattered." The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Choi's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. "Isn't it true you had behavioral issues?" "No," Hannah said simply. "But the CPS report. The CPS report was based on what my aunt told them. I was never interviewed alone. I was never asked what I needed." Choi sat down. The final witness was Joon-Ho. He took the stand with the same calm he'd carried into boardrooms for 40 years. But when Reyes asked him to explain why he'd trusted Minseo, something cracked in his composure. "I thought family meant something," he said quietly. "I thought blood obligation would ensure she'd protect Hannah the way I couldn't. I was wrong." "Have you had contact with your granddaughter since finding her?" "Every day. We're rebuilding what should never have been broken." "And what do you want from this case?" Joon-Ho looked at Minseo. "I want accountability. I want everyone who believed her lies to know the truth. And I want my granddaughter to understand that justice, even delayed, still matters." The hearing concluded with Judge Brennan's ruling. The case would proceed to trial. Criminal charges would stand. The civil suit for asset recovery would move forward. Minseo left the courthouse in silence, her life unraveling with each flash of cameras. Outside, Hannah stood beside her grandfather, Evelyn's hand on her shoulder. "How do you feel?" Evelyn asked. Hannah thought about it. "Lighter, like I don't have to carry all of it alone anymore." Joon-Ho looked at his granddaughter, this young woman who'd survived what would have broken most people, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. The trial would continue. The media would dissect every detail. But standing here, watching Hannah face the world that had tried to erase her, Joon-Ho understood something fundamental. Justice was important, but healing was sacred. And for the first time in 18 years, they had the chance for both. The apartment in West Hollywood had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Hollywood Hills. Hannah stood in the empty living room, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. "It's too much," she said for the third time. Joon-Ho leaned against the doorframe. "It's a 2-bedroom, hardly excessive. It has a doorman. Security is important. And a balcony. You need sunlight." Hannah turned to look at him, her expression caught between gratitude and overwhelm. "I've never had my own room. Now I have 2. Then you can use one for sleeping, and one for whatever you want. Art, music, storage. It's yours." The word settled between them. Yours. Hannah was still learning what that meant. Ownership, choice, permanence. For 18 years, she'd existed in borrowed spaces, always temporary, always contingent on someone else's tolerance. "I'll take it," she said quietly. By the end of the week, the apartment was furnished. Joon-Ho had hired an interior designer, but Hannah insisted on choosing everything herself. She picked comfortable furniture over expensive, plants over art, and a bookshelf that took up an entire wall. "I've never owned books before," she explained, running her hand along the empty shelves. "Just library cards. Then we'll fill it," Joon-Ho said. They spent an afternoon at the last bookstore in downtown LA, Hannah's eyes widening at the stacks that seemed to reach the ceiling. Joon-Ho watched her select novels, poetry, history, each choice careful, deliberate, meaningful. By the time they left, they'd filled 3 bags. "This is too much," Hannah said again, but this time she was smiling. The trust fund had been partially restored, the civil suit had frozen Min Seo's assets, and the house in Hancock Park would be sold to recover funds. Hannah now had access to approximately $1.3 million, with more to come as the legal process continued. But money, Hannah was learning, was the easy part. She enrolled in a GED program through Los Angeles Community College, determined to finish her education. Her caseworker, a kind woman named Iris Martinez, helped her navigate the paperwork and connected her with tutoring resources. "You're incredibly bright," Iris said after reviewing Hannah's placement tests. "Have you thought about college?" Hannah had. Late at night, in her new apartment, she'd pull up university websites and wonder what it would be like to attend classes, to study something that interested her, to become someone beyond survival. "Maybe," she said carefully. "You should. You'd thrive." Joon-Ho thought so too. "What would you want to study?" he asked one evening over dinner, a ritual they'd established, meeting twice a week at various restaurants across LA. Hannah considered the question. Social work, maybe, or non-profit management, something that helps people who are where I was. "You'd be extraordinary at that." "You don't know that." "I do. You survived systems that were designed to make you disappear. You learned to navigate resources most people don't even know exist. That's not luck, that's skill." Hannah looked at him across the table. These dinners had become easier, more natural. The careful distance of those first weeks had softened into something that felt like family. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Do you regret it? Not being there? When I was growing up?" Joon-Ho set down his fork, meeting her eyes. "Every single day. But regret is just grief in a different shape. What matters now is what we build going forward. What if I'm not good at this? At what? Having family. Trusting people. I'm so used to being alone." "Then we'll figure it out together," Joon-Ho said. "Neither of us is very good at this, but maybe that's okay." The trial concluded in September. Min Seo was convicted on multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to repay all misappropriated funds. Her sons, now adults, publicly disavowed her actions. Her church community, once so supportive, quietly erased her from their narrative. Hannah attended the sentencing. When the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement, she stood. "I don't forgive you," she said, looking at Min Seo. "But I'm not going to let what you did define me. You took 18 years. You don't get the rest." Min Seo said nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Hannah walked past them without comment. She'd said everything that mattered. That evening, Joon-Ho knocked on her apartment door. When she answered, he was holding a small, wrapped box. "What's this?" "Something I should have given you 18 years ago." Hannah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a silver necklace, with a small pendant, a treble clef. "Your mother wore this," Joon-Ho said quietly. "She got it when she was 16. I found it in her things after she died. I thought you should have it." Hannah's hands trembled as she fastened it around her neck. "Thank you." "There's something else." Joon-Ho pulled out a folder. "I've established a scholarship program through the company. Full ride for young people who've aged out of foster care. It's called the Grace Park Memorial Scholarship." Hannah stared at the paperwork. "Why?" "Because you shouldn't have been alone. And because there are thousands of kids like you, smart, resilient, invisible. They deserve better. This is incredible. You inspired it. I just wrote the checks." Hannah looked at her grandfather, this man who'd failed her, and then spent every day since trying to make it right, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe something close to peace. "Will you help me run it?" Joon-Ho asked. "The scholarship program. I need someone who understands what these kids are facing. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know everything that matters. The rest is just logistics." Hannah nodded slowly. "Okay. Yes, I'll help." Over the following months, they built the program together. Hannah interviewed applicants, reviewed essays, sat on selection committees. She met young people who reminded her of herself, careful, guarded, determined not to hope too hard. "You made it through," she told one 18-year-old during an interview. That's not luck. That's strength. The girl looked at her with the same disbelief Hannah had felt 6 months earlier. You really think I can do this? I know you can. By Christmas, Hannah had enrolled in college classes. By spring, she'd made friends. By summer, she'd stopped flinching when her grandfather called. The trust fund was fully restored. The apartment felt like home. The future, for the first time, felt possible. One evening, sitting on her balcony watching the sun set over LA, Hannah's phone buzzed. A text from Joon-Ho. Dinner tomorrow. Thinking about opening a second shelter in your mother's name. Hannah smiled. I'm in. Let's do it. She looked out at the city, the place where she'd learned to survive, and now, finally, was learning to live. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, that was still unwritten. And for the first time in 18 years, Hannah Park believed she deserved to write it. 2 years after finding Hannah, Park Joon-Ho stood in the lobby of the Grace Park Center for Women's Empowerment. The building, a renovated warehouse in Arts District, Los Angeles, housed a shelter, job training programs, and transitional housing. The walls were painted warm yellow, the same color as Hope House, where this journey had begun. Today was the grand opening. Hannah stood beside him, now 20 years old, wearing a navy dress and the treble clef necklace she never took off. She'd graduated from community college and was enrolled at UCLA, studying social work. She volunteered at the center 3 days a week and had become the face of the Grace Park Memorial Scholarship, speaking at fundraisers and conferences about foster care reform. She was, Joon-Ho thought with fierce pride, exactly who her mother would have wanted her to become. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Hannah admitted. Public speaking still isn't my thing. You'll be great. You always are. The lobby filled with donors, community leaders, and the young women who would be the center's first residents. Evelyn Brooks was there, having left Hope House to become the center's director. Daniel Cross attended with his family. Even James Morrison had flown down from San Francisco. When it was time for speeches, Joon-Ho stepped to the microphone first. 2 years ago, I believed success was measured in acquisitions and market share, he began. I'd built a fortune but lost the only things that mattered. My wife, my daughter, and 18 years with my granddaughter. I told myself I was protecting her by staying away. In reality, I was protecting myself from failure. He paused, looking at Hannah. Finding Hannah changed everything. Not because I finally did something right, but because she showed me what resilience actually looks like. She survived systems designed to make her disappear, and instead of breaking, she became someone determined to fix those systems for others. The room was silent. This center exists because Hannah insisted that her story shouldn't be unique, that every young woman aging out of foster care deserves safety, education, and the belief that they matter. We can't change the past, but we can change how many people face the future alone. He stepped back, and Hannah took the microphone. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady. I don't remember my mother, she said, but I know she played violin. I know she was scared when she was pregnant with me. I know she wanted me, even though someone told me for years that I was unwanted. Hannah looked out at the audience. For 18 years, I believed I was disposable. I believed that asking for help meant admitting I was a burden. I learned to make myself small, invisible, easy to ignore. She paused. But the truth is, I was never disposable. None of us are. The system failed. The adults who should have protected me failed. But I didn't fail, and neither did the women who will walk through these doors. Her voice grew stronger. This center is named for my mother because she didn't get to see me grow up. But every woman who graduates from our programs, every young person who receives a scholarship, every life that changes because someone finally said, "You matter." That's her legacy. And it's mine, too. The applause was immediate and sustained. Hannah stepped back, her eyes wet, and Joon-Ho squeezed her shoulder. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. So would yours, Hannah replied. After the ceremony, they toured the building together. The shelter had 20 beds, each with privacy curtains and storage lockers. The job training center offered courses in everything from coding to culinary arts. The transitional apartments upstairs provided 6 months of supported housing, while women found jobs and permanent homes. "This is what $2 million should have built," Hannah said quietly, standing in the common area where women could cook, study, and simply be safe. "It's what we're building now," Joon-Ho replied. Better late than never. They found Evelyn in her new office, already fielding calls from potential residents. "You did it," she said, hugging Hannah. "Look what you built." "We built it," Hannah corrected. "All of us." That evening, just the two of them, Joon-Ho and Hannah had dinner at a quiet restaurant in Santa Monica. They sat outside, watching the ocean turn gold in the sunset. "I've been thinking," Hannah said, "about what comes after UCLA. Graduate school, maybe. Or maybe I work at the center full-time, help expand to other cities." She paused. "I want to do something that matters." "You already do." "No, I mean," she struggled to find the words, "I want to make sure no other kid spends 18 years believing they're worthless. I want to build systems that work instead of systems that hide people." Joon-Ho smiled. "Then do it. Whatever you need, funding, connections, space, it's yours. I don't want it to just be your money, though. I want to raise funds, build coalitions, prove the model works." Even better. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Hannah spoke again, her voice soft. "I forgive you, you know, for not being there when I was little." Joon-Ho set down his fork, his throat tight. "You don't have to. I know. But I do anyway. Because you're here now. And because I think we've built something better than what we lost." Joon-Ho reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Your grandmother used to say that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you teach people to build for themselves. I didn't understand that until I met you. What do you understand now? That being present matters more than being perfect. That money is just a tool. And that the greatest thing I'll ever do isn't the company or the patents or any of it." He looked at his granddaughter. "It's getting to watch you become who you are." Hannah smiled, tears streaming down her face. "That's the sappiest thing you've ever said. I'm old. I'm allowed to be sappy." They laughed together, the sound carrying over the ocean breeze. Later, walking along the Santa Monica pier, Hannah stopped to lean against the railing, watching the waves crash beneath the lights. "Do you think she'd be proud?" she asked. "My mom, Grace." Joon-Ho stood beside her. "Yes, absolutely. Even though I don't play violin, especially because you don't. You're not trying to be her. You're becoming yourself. That's what every parent wants." Hannah nodded, absorbing that. Then she pulled out her phone and showed him something, a video on YouTube. "This girl messaged me last week. She was aging out of foster care, saw my scholarship interview, applied and won. Listen, in the video, a young woman stood in a college dorm room, grinning. 'I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and it's because someone I've never met decided I was worth investing in. So thank you, Hannah Park. You changed my life.'" Joon-Ho watched the video, then looked at his granddaughter. "That's legacy. That's what money is supposed to do," Hannah said. "Change lives, build futures, prove people matter." They stayed there for a while, watching the ocean, neither needing to say anything else. 2 years ago, Park Joon-Ho had discovered his granddaughter living in a shelter, her childhood stolen, her future uncertain. He'd been too late to give her the childhood she deserved. But standing here, watching Hannah become someone who would make sure no one else had to fight alone, Joon-Ho understood something profound. You can't change the past, but you can refuse to let it define the future. And sometimes, if you're incredibly lucky, you get a second chance to do the one thing that matters most. Be present, be honest, be family. Everything else is just money. And money, in the end, is only as valuable as what you build with it.